To truly understand the magnitude of that betrayal, you need to know the toxic dynamic. I had always been the invisible child, the one who quietly worked hard, built her practice, and was then expected to contribute everything. My brother, Mark, was the charming, high-maintenance star who always needed attention and constant bailouts. I, on the other hand, built my practice from the ground up, working long, focused hours. My parents tragically viewed my success not as an accomplishment to celebrate, but purely as a financial liability to exploit. They saw me only as the emergency safety net. Susan demanded with entitled need, Mark leaned on me without shame, and my father, Robert, stayed completely quiet, his silence endorsing their every transgression and deepening my isolation. I'm Katie King, 29, a Kansas City psychologist. My mother, Susan, refused to watch my son, Leo, claiming poor health. Just hours later, I saw her joyfully babysitting my brother Mark's kids. My chest instantly tightened, calculated betrayal. In that moment, the pain turned to ice. That very night, I secretly canceled every single financial payment I'd been covering for my family for years. The revenge was swift. The realization hit harder than the betrayal itself. I was trusted completely with their bills, their debt the financial bedrock of their lives. Yet I was never trusted with their genuine love or their time. The wound cut deep, a cold truth. I was financially essential, but utterly disposable emotionally. If that was the family dynamic, what was my move? I had traded genuine connection for professional success. And that success, it became their personal slush fund. For years, I covered their mortgage, my brother's car payments, and all of Susan's emergency credit card debt. The funny thing is, they genuinely thought they were financially independent, completely oblivious to the fact that I was the ghost in their machine. I held all the power, and they never bothered to check. They were too preoccupied with Mark's drama. But the moment Susan looked me in the eye, lied about her health to avoid watching my son, and then chose my brother's kids instead, that snapped the final thread. The invisible daughter finally felt visible as a threat. The money stopped flowing that night. The game changed instantly. If my family saw me only as a wallet, what happens when that wallet suddenly empties? Within 48 hours, the calls began. Susan was furious, her voice shaking over past due notices for the mortgage and Mark's car. She demanded an explanation, assuming a banking error. While she ranted, I used the silence to build something for myself. I launched a YouTube channel, The Psych Whisperer, sharing insights on coping with toxic relationships, no mention of my own family, of course. My passion was finally finding an outlet beyond their endless demands. I poured my energy into healing others, and surprisingly, the channel instantly found an audience. My focus shifted from their debt to my own creative control. The inevitable family dinner arrived, a true test of wills. Susan immediately launched into how my little online hobby was a distraction from my real responsibilities. She then brought out the classic comparison, Mark has real ambition. He's building a legacy. You're just talking into a camera when you should be helping your own flesh and blood survive. Mark, ever the victim, chimed in with manufactured sadness. It's just that mom and dad need stability, Katie. Maybe your little channel can pay for our electricity bill. Just a thought. That was my breaking point. I looked straight at them, not defending my work, but the principle. My financial help wasn't a bank account. It was a bridge of respect, and you burned it the moment you lied to me about my son. No more handouts. My revenge was officially visible, and the room went silent. I was working double time. Full client load in the day, then script writing and editing for the Psych Whisperer at night. The channel was growing fast, ironically fueled by the pain my family caused. Meanwhile, their life was unraveling. Robert's quiet calls started, not for help, but just to check in, testing the waters. I was polite, but utterly detached. Mark, of course, was silent. His bills were still unpaid. The real climax was Susan's escalating anxiety. She didn't call me anymore. She started leaving comments on my YouTube videos, veiled threats about revealing my true, manipulative nature to my subscribers. She had finally discovered my secret passion and tried to weaponize it. But I was ready. The more they struggled financially, the more my platform for truth grew. This wasn't just revenge, it was my hard-earned independence. My channel hit a massive milestone, 100,000 subscribers, and an industry award for best mental health content. I finally achieved success that was purely my own, untainted by their need or control. Susan and Mark saw this as a direct threat. They ramped up their public attacks, creating fake accounts to flood my comment sections with claims that I was abandoning family and profiting from others' pain. Robert surprisingly called. He didn't ask for money, but for a truce. "Katie," he pleaded, "your mother is sick with worry. Can't you just say it was a misunderstanding? This social media thing is making it worse." I responded with zero emotion. "It was never a misunderstanding, Dad. It was a choice. Your choice to prioritize Mark. My choice to prioritize my peace. And this social media thing is actually my career, something you never respected." He went silent, realizing the extent of the damage they had caused. They wanted me to sacrifice my success for their comfort. The final blow came when Susan's credit score plummeted, jeopardizing the house itself. She called, this time genuinely desperate, but I was untouchable. The question is, did I finally have the power to let their whole world crumble? My biggest video success led to a keynote speech on financial abuse in families. After the talk, a man approached me. His name was Daniel. He was a smart, empathetic investigative journalist. We met for coffee the next day. I cautiously told him about the situation, the years of financial support, the emotional exploitation, and the calculated decision to cut them off. I held my breath, waiting for judgment. Daniel didn't judge. He just listened intently, then said something profound. "Your revenge isn't about cruelty, Katie. It's about reclaiming your inherent worth from people who deliberately minimized it. That's a story of survival." For the first time, someone saw my actions not as vengeful, but as deeply therapeutic. He helped me understand the power dynamic I had flipped. He validated every choice I had made. His perspective changed everything. Daniel became more than a friend, he became my anchor. He urged me to tell the full story, to stop hiding behind veiled generalities on my channel. He promised to help me document the final, decisive confrontation. I knew the moment was coming. Daniel's presence brought stability. He saw my success as protection, not a resource. We worked side by side, him researching, me scripting. My channel exploded, hitting 250,000 subscribers. I felt safe and seen for the first time. Meanwhile, the situation at home was critical. The house payments defaulted. Foreclosure papers arrived. Susan was frantic, blaming Robert for not handling me, and blaming me for being a vindictive monster. Mark, predictably, turned on everyone. He demanded money from his parents and blamed me publicly on social media, accusing me of intentionally bankrupting them out of jealousy for his potential. The narcissism was astounding. Daniel pointed out the painful truth. They haven't asked for help, Katie. They've only demanded control. His clarity was my final shield. I knew I had to expose the root of the exploitation. We prepared my biggest video yet, the full story, revealing the exact financial documents and Susan's lie about my son. It was the only way to silence them forever. Everything was set for the family's final showdown. The question is, what price would my total freedom demand? The video was titled, "The Invisible Daughter: How I Bankrolled My Own Betrayal." Daniel meticulously cross-checked every financial document. This wasn't just my story, it was an expose proving the calculated financial abuse I endured. The desperation intensified. Susan resorted to bribes. She offered to watch Leo anytime I needed, suddenly cured of her illness. She framed it as a fresh start, hoping to buy my silence with the very thing she initially denied me. Mark, ever the aggressor, sent threatening texts, accusing Daniel of using me. He vowed to tell my professional board that I was exploiting patient vulnerability for content. His attacks lacked substance, but they carried a brief sting. Robert made one final haunting call. He admitted that their reliance on me was wrong, but begged me not to publish the financials, citing shame. "You'll destroy your mother, Katie. Please, just let her keep her dignity." I told Robert, very calmly, that dignity was lost the moment they chose Mark's comfort over my son's care. I pressed upload. The full story, the cold, hard numbers, and Susan's lie all launched into the digital universe. Daniel held my hand. The weight of years of resentment lifted, replaced by a strange, quiet peace. The consequences would be massive, but I was finally free. The digital bomb was dropped. Now, how would they react when the truth became their brand new, inescapable reality? The video went viral overnight. The comments were brutal. The public was firmly on my side. People recognized the pattern of financial and emotional abuse. My family's carefully curated image was shattered instantly. Susan was the first to face the humiliation. Her friends and church group, seeing the receipts and the clear lie about my son, immediately distanced themselves. Her social standing, the thing she valued most, was gone. Mark's potential vanished. His car, which I had paid for, was repossessed. Worse, his business contacts, who saw his narcissistic public rants, cut him off. He wasn't the star anymore, he was just an unemployed freeloader exposed. Susan made one last, desperate attempt. She showed up at my office, tears streaming, offering to sign anything, promising to be the mother I deserved. She offered me the emotional connection she'd withheld for decades. I didn't let her in. I spoke through the closed door. "It's too late, Mom. You didn't just hurt me, you hurt my son. The account is closed. I choose peace now." It was my final act of self-respect. I heard her leave, not with anger, but with the sound of pure, exhausted defeat. The house was eventually lost. My family imploded, and I watched it happen from a safe, strong distance. My revenge was complete, but the story wasn't over. How do you start a new life when the people who shaped your past are finally gone? Life after the video felt like stepping into color. Daniel and I moved into a new home, one where every bill belonged to us, not them. The silence was golden. It was the sound of unconditional peace. The Psych Whisperer transcended a YouTube channel. It became a community. I launched a successful book and started speaking at larger conferences, not as a victim, but as a survivor advocating for self-respect and boundaries. Mark's downfall was swift and deserved. With his connections severed and his financial crutch gone, his potential proved to be entirely illusory. He moved back in with our parents, a bitter irony. The inevitable finally happened. The house, the symbol of their control and my sacrifice, went into foreclosure. The final notice was published. Robert quietly signed the papers. There were no more grand dramatic gestures. Susan's pride shattered. She couldn't handle the public shame or the loss of her perfect suburban life. She withdrew completely, her anger replaced by a hollow silence. The performance was over, the audience had left. Robert sent me an email months later. He didn't apologize for himself, but for allowing Susan and Mark's behavior to become the defining factor of our relationship. He said he finally understood the difference between a check and a hug. My son, Leo, knew nothing of the storm. He only knew Daniel's warmth and his mother's new peace. He was the reason I fought and the reason I stopped. Protecting his innocence was the true win. Revenge isn't satisfying in the way movies suggest. It's heavy. But what was satisfying was watching the illusion of their perfection crumble. My financial independence was my sword, and my voice was my shield. I haven't seen Susan or Mark since. I occasionally receive an email from Robert. I reply politely, keeping the necessary distance. I chose my own family, my own peace, and my own definition of success. I had spent so long being the daughter they demanded, I almost forgot how to be the person I was meant to be. My revenge wasn't the goal, it was just the painful, necessary exit strategy. My story proves that you can regain control, even when your foundation is built on lies. What about you? If you had to choose between your family's expectations and your own peace, which would you pick, and why? Let me know in the comments below. The day the video was set to drop felt strangely quiet. Daniel and I had double-checked everything. The air was thick with intense anticipation, but my personal feeling was a cold, hard resolve. Susan called first. She wasn't pleading this time, she was hysterically threatening to claim I was unstable and had fabricated the evidence. She didn't know Daniel had helped me document every single conversation. Mark showed up at my old apartment, convinced I was hiding there. He left a rambling, incoherent voicemail, admitting, in a moment of utter desperation, that he knew Mom favored him and that he deliberately fostered that dynamic. Robert sent a cryptic text. "The money is gone, Katie. You won." That single line confirmed everything. They had completely depleted their resources, probably trying to fix the credit score damage I had inflicted. At 1 p.m., I pressed the button. I didn't feel rage or joy. I felt the release of a massive physical weight. This wasn't revenge for a single slight. It was justice for years of being deliberately minimized and exploited. Daniel immediately monitored the traffic. The numbers surged faster than any previous video. My followers understood this was the full, uncensored truth behind the vague boundary-setting advice I'd given before. The comments became a digital battlefield. My supporters rallied, but Mark and Susan's remaining loyalists attacked, calling me a pariah and a sadistic daughter. My viewers quickly defended me, posting the damning financial screenshots. The local news picked it up. Not the family drama itself, but the ethical conflict of a successful psychologist exposing her family's private finances. The publicity was massive, guaranteeing Susan and Mark's humiliation would be total. The ultimate failure for Mark came when his largest business investor, a man who believed in his legacy, left a public comment condemning him for his unethical dependence. His career was utterly destroyed by a YouTube comment. I didn't celebrate. The true victory wasn't their downfall, it was the fact that for the first time I had defined my own truth, in my own words, for the world to see. I looked at Daniel and I felt pure, uncomplicated love. The noise eventually faded. The outrage subsided. What remained was my independence, their shame, and the irreversible closure of a toxic chapter. The revenge was a success, but the real story was the peace it bought me. The day after the video, the response was overwhelming. Messages flooded in from people who felt seen and validated by my honesty. Their support was the real reward, proving my fight was for a bigger purpose. That evening, Daniel proposed. He didn't offer me financial security, he offered me unconditional partnership and a family built on respect. The ring wasn't an escape, it was a choice to build a future, free of the past. The contrast was stark. While my old family's foundation of lies was crumbling into foreclosure and public shame, my new family's foundation was being laid with honesty and mutual self-worth. Robert sent one last, formal letter, accepting the consequences. He enclosed an old childhood drawing of mine, the only thing he could save. It was his silent, painful acknowledgement of the daughter he had failed. I realized my revenge had been a necessary act of self-preservation. It forced a clean break where none would have existed. I wasn't just not paying their bills anymore, I had completely excised the infection. My family became Daniel, Leo, and the millions of people who found strength in my story. This new family valued my voice and my work, not my bank account. That profound shift was the ultimate victory. My professional reputation, which Mark had tried to destroy, soared. Being transparent about my experience made me a more effective, authentic psychologist. My vulnerability became my greatest professional strength. The old life was a heavy coat I finally shrugged off. I learned that you cannot earn love through money or sacrifice. You have to demand respect and be willing to walk away from the people who won't give it to you. Leo, now older, talks about Daniel as his dad. He has a stable, loving home, free from the drama and silent resentment. That is the definition of true victory, beyond any revenge scheme. I look back at the invisible girl who thought money bought love, and I smile. She got her revenge, but more importantly, she got her life. She is visible now, to herself and the world. If you've rebuilt your life after cutting off a toxic family, what was the hardest part of finding your new self-worth? Share your journey and let others know they're not alone in building their own bridge to peace. My professional life was exploding. Endorsements, bigger speaking gigs, and millions of views. By any objective metric, I was thriving. But success, when achieved through trauma, doesn't always bring immediate, unadulterated joy. There was an emotional void. Even though my family's toxic influence was gone, the space they used to occupy remained. It was a strange grief, mourning the family I wished I had, not the one I lost. Daniel was my constant. He didn't try to fill the void, he validated its existence. It's okay to feel sad about what could have been, Katie. That sadness doesn't diminish your triumph. It just proves your humanity. Mark, predictably, tried to latch onto my success. He created a new social media profile and left highly visible, venomous comments on my professional pages, claiming I was psychologically projecting my own issues. This time, I didn't engage. My community did. They flooded his comments with screenshots of the financial evidence, shutting him down completely. My power was no longer just my own strength, it was the collective weight of truth. Susan's downfall was quieter. She became completely reliant on Robert, who had become a shell of a man. The loss of her status was a physical ailment. Her greatest fear, being unimportant, had become her inescapable reality. Daniel, sensing my lingering attachment, helped me take the final step, completely blocking their phone numbers and emails. It felt brutal, but necessary. It was the digital equivalent of burning the last bridge. I realized the emptiness I felt wasn't a punishment for revenge. It was simply the absence of chronic pain. When the poison leaves your system, you don't instantly feel joy, you feel quiet, and then you start to heal. My biggest achievement wasn't the subscriber count, it was seeing Leo thrive. He had never known the toxic dependency. His world was built on consistency and love, proving that generational trauma ends with me. The revenge was the ignition, but the freedom was the journey. I had traded the false comfort of being needed for the genuine power of being independent. The emptiness was the price for the unburdened future. I look back at the invisible girl who thought money bought love, and I smile. She got her revenge, but more importantly, she got her life. She is visible now, to herself and the world. It takes courage to create your own quiet. For those who've walked away, what unexpected emotion did you feel most strongly once the fight was finally over? And what did you do to heal that last bit of pain? The video started not with anger, but with a stark, cold fact, a spreadsheet detailing every dollar sent since I was 18. $400,000. That number was the first punch. Cut to Susan. She was watching, initially scoffing at the title. But as the spreadsheet appeared, her face drained of all color. Terror replaced arrogance. The numbers didn't lie. I narrated, "This isn't a loan. It's an investment in a lie. I was paying for my brother Mark's lifestyle, his potential, while being told I was being cared for." Then came the core truth. I played the recording of Susan claiming Leo's autism was too much effort to deal with, right after accepting a $5,000 loan for Mark's business launch. Silence. Susan lunged for the TV, trying to mute the video, but Robert, sitting beside her, simply stared at the screen, defeated. He finally grasped the depth of her calculated cruelty. Mark, watching on his phone, furiously typed a denial comment, claiming the audio was doctored. but my video immediately presented the original audio file metadata and the corresponding bank transaction. Game over. A montage of quick, painful flashbacks. Susan dismissing Leo, Mark driving a new car, Katie at the ATM, set to the sound of Robert's quiet voice saying, "She's always been good with money." I wasn't good with money. I was your cash machine. And when the machine broke, you didn't see a daughter, you saw an inconvenience. That truth landed with the force of a wrecking ball. The comments section exploded not with debate, but with unanimous outrage. Invisible daughter immediately trended. The world saw them for what they were, calculated manipulators. Susan called my cell repeatedly. Daniel blocked the number silently. Her voicemail was pure, panicked, desperate screaming. Not about losing the house, but about the humiliation. Mark was immediately fired. His boss, a fan of my channel, posted a concise statement online: "We do not endorse unethical financial behavior." Mark was cut loose, his last tether broken by his own greed. Robert didn't call. He knew there was nothing left to say. His acceptance of the abuse was his final, silent sentence. I felt a pang of pity, but no guilt. The price for his silence was their destruction. I watched the news reports, the online furor, the sheer scope of their public shame. It was intoxicating but brief. The true victory wasn't the schadenfreude, but the irreversible closure it purchased. Daniel looked at me and said, "Now the healing begins." And he was right. I had cleared the ground. The poisoned roots were pulled out. My revenge was complete, and the garden of my new life was ready to be planted. The next day, I had a scheduled interview. The reporter didn't ask about my channel's growth. They asked about the ethical cost of my revenge. I didn't flinch. I told the reporter my ethical obligation is to my patient, my child, and my own mental health. Their cruelty was financed by my labor. Exposing that wasn't revenge, it was public self-defense. A distant aunt, acting as an intermediary, tried to broker peace. She begged me to take the video down for the sake of the family name. I laughed. The family name died when they cashed the checks. Mark's social media posts became increasingly unhinged. He accused me of being a government plant, a spy. He lost all credibility. The man who dreamed of a legacy became a fringe conspiracy theorist. Susan, meanwhile, was completely paralyzed. The humiliation was so profound she couldn't leave the house. Her entire identity was tied to social approval, and the public had delivered the ultimate rejection. Robert was the only one who showed a hint of genuine sadness. Not for the money, but for the family unit. He lost his wife, his favorite son's respect, and his daughter's presence. He was simply alone. After weeks of noise, the silence was the greatest gift. No calls, no requests, no expectations. It was the absolute, unadulterated sound of independence. I hadn't had that since I was a child. Daniel organized a small, private ceremony for Leo's birthday. No family, just us. It was symbolic. We were celebrating a future unburdened by history. He was my anchor in the calm after the storm. I realized the final piece of my revenge wasn't the video. It was giving Leo the childhood I never had, safe, supported, and valued unconditionally. That was the true closure. I deleted their contacts forever. Not out of anger, but out of recognition that they were simply irrelevant to my future. They were a closed book, their pages stained, but the story was now mine. Mark wanted a legacy. I built one. It's not a business built on debt, it's a community built on empathy and survival. That is the legacy of the invisible daughter. My biggest lesson: justice is rarely served quietly. Sometimes the only way to expose a cruel truth is to shine a light so bright it burns away the shadows they hide in. We often hear about revenge, but rarely about the aftermath. For those who finally broken free from the chains of a toxic family, what unexpected peace did you discover in the silence after the storm? Months passed. The chaos subsided, replaced by a deep, cleansing peace. Our new home was filled with Leo's laughter, not their demands. I felt safe and anchored, believing the battle was truly over. Then came the email. Subject line, family emergency, we need to talk. It was Susan using a burner account. No apology, just the implicit command for me to fix their crisis. The body of the email was a masterpiece of narcissistic denial. She claimed the video was misleading and that Mark was suffering a breakdown because of me. She asked for a small loan to rent a new apartment. Mark attached a dramatic, poorly written note, claiming that if I didn't help, he might lose his chance at redemption. It was the same old entitlement, cloaked in fake vulnerability. I drafted a reply, but Daniel stopped me. He reminded me they need the silence, Katie. That is your loudest answer. I deleted the draft. Silence was my final, impenetrable wall. I blocked the burner account. I realized their attempts weren't about love or reconciliation. They were pure financial desperation wrapped in emotional language. The victim in the email was always Mark, never me. Later that day, Leo drew a picture of our new family. Daniel, Leo, and me, no one else. I understood then that my duty was to the family I chose, the one that truly sees me. Forgiveness isn't always reconciliation. Sometimes it's simply realizing they are no longer powerful enough to hurt you. My freedom was not conditional on their change, it was conditional on my own detachment. We talk a lot about setting boundaries, but how do you maintain a zero-contact boundary when the other side keeps testing it? What strategies did you use to completely block out the noise and secure your peace? Just as the silence began to feel permanent, the crisis arrived. Not a polite request, but a full-blown emergency designed to trigger my old caretaker instincts. Mark, in his desperate attempt to fund his legacy after the video, had tried a small-scale, amateur Ponzi scheme. He was arrested for wire fraud. It was the predictable, pathetic end to his endless potential. Susan found a way to contact Daniel's work email. Her message was pure manipulation. She demanded I use my professional platform and connections to get Mark a good lawyer and publicly vouch for his character. The core threat: if I didn't help, she would publicly expose Daniel's role in my initial video, a desperate, toothless attempt to destabilize the only safe haven I had built. The old Katie would have panicked. The new Katie felt a cold sense of finality. They had crossed the ultimate lane, threatening my peace and Daniel's professional life. My boundaries were now non-negotiable. Daniel's reaction confirmed my choice. He said, "Their crisis is not our responsibility. We built this life for us, not to save them. Let them face the natural consequences of their actions." We responded with absolute silence. No emails, no calls, no intermediaries. The refusal to engage was the most powerful rejection I could deliver. They were no longer worthy of my emotional labor. Robert made one attempt. He sent a single letter, postmarked from a different city, merely detailing Mark's charges. No request, just a statement of fact, a final, weak plea for pity. I tore the letter without reading it fully. I had paid my dues. My son's future was more important than their present despair. "It stops here," I whispered. The generational debt was finally cleared. The crisis was a test. It proved that my growth was real. I no longer confused control with love. My heart ached briefly for the daughter they killed, but it quickly healed for the woman I had become. We booked a long-delayed family vacation. As we planned, the news reports of Mark's arraignment and the house foreclosure faded into background noise. My life was finally the main story. A reporter tried to ambush me outside my office, asking for comment on Mark's charges. I simply smiled, stated my work is focused on healing and boundaries, and kept walking. No reaction, no power. The media, realizing I wouldn't feed the drama, shifted their focus from my family's crime to my success story. My book became a bestseller. The narrative was finally mine to control. I received one last, cryptic email from Robert's old account. It contained only a link to a news article about Mark's legal troubles. No text. It was his final, non-verbal admission of defeat. I didn't click the link. I didn't need to. The most profound realization was that their lives, their arrests, their poverty were now irrelevant to my personal well-being. That was true freedom. Leo would never know the drama of his uncle's arrest or his grandmother's shame. I successfully shielded him from the generational poison. My purpose was fulfilled. The new crisis wasn't a setback, it was the final, definitive test of my independence. I passed. I had moved beyond just reacting to their chaos. I was actively creating my own calm. When you set a firm boundary, the other side will inevitably escalate the crisis. How did you handle that final desperate move from your toxic person? And what reinforced your decision to stand firm? A few months later, I ran into an old neighbor. We exchanged pleasantries, but inevitably, the conversation turned to them. I maintained a pleasant, professional distance. The neighbor dropped the bomb. Susan and Mark were living in a small rental, and Mark was openly blaming Robert for failing to protect his investment. No mention of his fraud or my efforts. That was the moment of harsh realization. They hadn't learned a single thing. They hadn't felt guilt, only inconvenience. Their narcissistic core was totally intact. I had waited deep down for a flicker of remorse, a real apology. But there was none. Their reality was always about external validation, and now they blamed the person who couldn't give it anymore. The neighbor mentioned Robert was working 2 part-time jobs, trying to keep Mark out of jail and Susan quiet. He was still enabling them, even after everything. His loyalty was a sickness. I smiled sweetly at the neighbor and ended the conversation. I walked out and felt absolute peace. The need for them to change had finally died. I accepted the cruel truth of who they were. My revenge had not cured them. It had merely forced them to reveal their true, unrepentant selves in a smaller, darker stage. The power wasn't in their downfall. It was in my non-reaction. Revenge isn't about making the other person suffer. It's about giving yourself justice. I got the $400,000 worth of peace I had paid for. The silence was the ROI, return on investment. Their story was stuck on repeat, blame, crisis, and entitlement. But my story moved on to love, stability, and growth. I had changed the channel, and I was never looking back. The realization that they would never change was the most painful, yet most liberating truth. It meant I was truly free, not just from their debt, but from the exhausting hope for reconciliation. For those on their healing journey, what was the hardest piece of old baggage? The hope, the guilt, the need for validation that you finally had to let go of to achieve your own final definitive peace? My life had moved on, but my experience became my greatest professional asset. I was invited to speak at a major conference on codependency and financial abuse. This stage was my final transformation. I didn't shy away from my story. I opened by saying, I am Katie, and I am the invisible daughter of 2 people who saw my bank account before they saw my face. The room fell into absolute silence. I spoke not as a victim, but as a clinical psychologist who had lived the data. I showed the spreadsheet, the same $400,000, not for pity, but as a case study in narcissistic exploitation. I told the audience, your financial worth and your self-worth must be 2 separate lines that never intersect. My family tried to fuse them. My survival was based on separating them completely. The reception was overwhelming. People lined up, not just for my signature, but to share their own stories of family entanglement. My pain became a beacon, illuminating a path for collective healing. Even in this professional triumph, Mark couldn't resist. He somehow had a friend tweet, she's profiting from her own family's misery. Still the opportunist. That tweet didn't sting. It validated the necessity of my action. I was profiting by building a new life and a platform to help others. That profit was earned, not demanded. Self-respect prevailed. Daniel watched from the back. His pride was visible, untainted by the drama. When I finished, he gave me a standing ovation, his face saying, "You did it. You are safe and free." My journey wasn't about revenge, it was about closing the loop of abuse. By standing up for myself publicly, I ensured that no one, including my own internalized voice, could ever make me feel invisible again. I had earned my peace. I had built my own family. And I had transformed my worst trauma into my life's greatest purpose. That, truly, is the end of the invisible daughter story. When did your trauma finally become your superpower? Share the moment you used your painful experience to advocate for yourself or others, and what was the most satisfying part of that transformation? Our life had settled into a beautiful, predictable rhythm. We were watching a documentary, far removed from the past, when Daniel got a notification from an obscure online forum. Susan and Mark had found a fringe platform, a desperate podcast, to deliver their final, unrepentant narrative. It was the last venomous attempt to rewrite history. Susan, looking tired but still defiant, claimed I was mentally unstable and had fabricated the entire financial abuse story to destroy their loving, supportive family out of jealousy. Mark went further. He painted himself as the victim of a calculated, corporate espionage plot, claiming I used my big tech connections to deliberately tank his business and set him up for fraud charges. Daniel reached for the remote, wanting to turn it off. I stopped him. "No, let it play. I need to see the final, pure form of their brokenness." It was terrifyingly familiar, yet powerless. Not a single word of the interview was dedicated to remorse or self-reflection. It was all external blame, a desperate attempt to find an audience who would affirm their victim status. The difference was my reaction. Years ago, their words would have shattered me, sparking weeks of guilt and self-doubt. Now they were just noise. I had built an unmovable internal wall. I realized this broadcast wasn't about me. It was the echo of their own self-destruction. They needed me to react to prove they were still relevant. I was watching them implode. Daniel turned off the TV. He didn't ask how I felt. He simply said, "Well, they haven't changed. But you have, and that's all that matters." His validation was my true shield. With that final, pathetic broadcast, the last thread of attachment, the lingering hope for a genuine family was cut. It was a surgical, clean separation. The end was final. I looked over at Leo, asleep in his bed. His life was built on trust, safety, and transparency. He was the living, breathing proof that the cycle of abuse was broken forever. My revenge wasn't just exposing them, it was denying them my reaction. Their desperation for validation was their addiction. My non-participation was my ultimate power move. The foreclosure of their old house was completed the following week. It wasn't sad. That house had been a cage of conditional love. Its loss was a liberation for the invisible girl who lived there. Mark, who once mocked my salary, was now facing felony charges. Susan, who demanded deference, was now invisible to the world. Their desire for grandiosity led to their small, pathetic ending. Robert remained with Susan. His inability to leave her was his own form of prison. I had saved myself, but I couldn't save him from his self-imposed destiny. That was a heavy, but necessary, acceptance. We changed our addresses, phone numbers, and created new, private accounts. We built a digital fortress around our family. They could broadcast all they wanted, but the signal would never reach us. The ultimate truth of this story is that I achieved the greatest revenge possible. I made them irrelevant. Their drama, their lies, their blame, it ceased to be my problem. I look at the community we built, the thousands who shared their stories. Our legacy wasn't in the destruction of the old, but in the construction of the new, a community of validation and healing. They will blame me forever. But blame is their comfort blanket. I don't need their forgiveness, and I certainly don't need their false narrative. My truth is built on evidence and a peaceful life. My story is not an example of how to get rich, but how to get free. Free from debt, free from guilt, and free from the constant need to prove my own worth. If you're an invisible daughter or son right now, remember, your love is not a transaction. Your worth is not a number. The hardest step is often the first turning off their noise. The camera pulls back. Katie, Daniel, and Leo are walking away, hand in hand, toward a bright future. The podcast noise is now completely muted. The volume of the past is zero. Now that you've heard the whole journey from invisibility to absolute independence, what is the one single word that defines your next step in rewriting your own family story? After the podcast, the noise from my biological family truly ceased. But silence doesn't mean absence. It means you can finally hear the right voices. I opened the comments section one last time. It wasn't hate. It was a digital hug. Katie, you saved me. I finally went no contact because of you. A collective sigh of relief. I received an email from a highly respected forensic accountant. He stated that the figures I presented were irrefutable and professionally sound, contradicting Mark's conspiracy theories. My old therapist, whom I hadn't spoken to in years, reached out. She wrote, "You have completed the trauma work. You transitioned from victim to advocate. I am deeply proud." Susan said I was mentally unstable. The world's leading experts confirmed I was professionally sound and healed. The contrast was a final, sweet vindication. My YouTube channel followers became my new family. They were the ones who saw the real me, not the invisible daughter, but the woman who chose courage over comfort. I started a non-profit initiative to provide legal resources for adult children facing financial exploitation. Turning pain into purpose meant the trauma had not won. Daniel walked in with 2 cups of tea. He didn't need to read the emails. He just needed to see me smiling without reservation. His quiet support was the foundation of my new self. The old family became a statistical anomaly, a bad chapter in a well-written book. Their attempts to drag me back only served to highlight my distance and my unwavering resolve. I was no longer seeking permission to exist. I was giving myself permission to thrive. That final shift in perspective was the only real, permanent change I needed to see. The story of revenge ended not with a bang, but with a collective voice confirming my truth. My healing became contagious. The invisible daughter became the visible advocate. If you are fighting the noise and seeking your own closure, remember the difference between their truth and your reality. One is based on fantasy and blame, the other on hard-won peace. Our online community grew into a powerful resource. We established weekly live sessions where people could share their progress and their boundaries. It was a space where blame had no entry. The legal reality of Mark's charges, soon resulting in a guilty plea, was a final, undeniable validation. The court system, though slow, eventually offered the objective truth my family had denied for decades. I had moved far beyond needing their approval. The approval of my husband, my son, and the thousands in my community who now call me their advocate, that was the only currency that mattered. Our life isn't full of drama, it's full of quiet moments. Reading bedtime stories to Leo. Cooking dinner with Daniel. The simplicity is the luxury I paid $400,000 to purchase. Toxicity is contagious, but so is healing. I chose to prioritize the healing. Every comment, every email, every shared story was a brick in the new foundation of my life. What was the most unlikely source of support that unexpectedly gave you the strength to break free from your own family's toxic cycle? Share your story of external validation in the comments below. A year after the video, Daniel and I bought our true family home. I signed the mortgage papers. The amount was large, but every penny was earned and owned by me. No inherited debt. No strings attached. It was the purest financial victory. Leo chose the color for his room, bright, optimistic yellow. It was a stark contrast to the gray silence that defined my childhood. His joy was my measurable success. My nonprofit, The Unseen Advocate, officially launched. We secured initial funding. My pain was actively being used to prevent the pain of others. That was redemption. Daniel designed the website. He handled the legal work. He didn't just support my healing, he was an active architect of my new infrastructure. We were truly a team. One Saturday I was gardening. Simple, manual work. I saw a small plant I was nurturing. It wouldn't grow if I constantly pulled at its roots. Just like healing. I checked my savings. The $400,000 I'd earned back was fully reinvested, growing steadily. The money was no longer a symbol of abuse, it was a symbol of my hard work and foresight. We hosted a small gathering, friends, colleagues, and my chosen family. I watched Leo play, surrounded by people who loved him unconditionally. This was the real definition of family. A small local paper ran an article about Mark being denied bail. I glanced at the photo of him, old, tired, and still defiant. The image elicited zero emotion. The connection was severed. Leo asked me, "Mommy, why do you look so happy here?" I pointed to Daniel and himself. Because, my love, we are safe and we get to write our own story without any old mistakes. The true victory wasn't the money or the fame. It was the ability to wake up without dread, without mentally checking the crisis list. My mind was finally my own. Learning to say no had been the hardest lesson. Now, no was the bedrock of my peaceful existence. It was a complete sentence, requiring zero justification. Our mornings were chaotic, yes, but they were our chaos, not theirs. We had replaced the anxiety of secrecy with the joy of shared madness. This new house didn't just have walls, it had boundaries. We locked the doors against those who hurt us, but we left the doors open for those who truly loved us. Leo will grow up knowing that self-respect is the only foundation you need. He will never inherit the financial burdens or the emotional chains. His freedom is my greatest achievement. There was an empty chair at our holiday dinner table. It was the chair reserved for the myth of the loving family. That myth had been replaced by the genuine warmth of the people actually sitting there. My work, both clinical and advocacy, felt essential. I wasn't doing it to prove anything to Susan or Mark. I was doing it because it was my purpose. My job defined my worth, not my debt. We marked the anniversary of the video not as a day of darkness, but as our Independence Day. It was the day we chose freedom and stopped being financially and emotionally colonized. The pain of the past didn't vanish, but its volume decreased. It became a quiet memory, a textbook example I now use to teach others how to recognize the signs. True revenge is living well. Not just appearing to live well, but building a life so rich in authenticity and peace that the toxicity simply cannot survive in its orbit. My final vow: I will never, ever let the actions of others define my value or my future. My choices, my love, my boundaries, these are my inheritance. Our life is proof that you can be broken and still rise stronger. You can lose everything and still build a kingdom of peace. This is where the story truly ends. We established traditions rooted in joy, not obligation. Sunday brunch was mandatory. Evening walks became non-negotiable. We prioritized presence over past trauma. Self-care transitioned from a necessity to a delight. Time spent on my well-being was no longer selfish. It was a required maintenance of the fortress of peace I had built. My final words to anyone trapped in this cycle: you are not crazy. The gaslighting is not real. Your freedom is possible. Start by believing the quiet voice inside you, not their loud lies. The camera lingers on the family home sign, then pans up to the clear, blue sky. The future is unwritten, but it is unburdened. If you had to describe your newly rebuilt life in just 3 words, what would they be? Share your kingdom of peace summary and what specific action finally made it real. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. This is Katie, the Unseen Advocate, signing off. Remember, your story is yours to write. If you had to describe your newly rebuilt life in just 3 words, what would they be? Share your kingdom of peace summary and what specific action finally made it real. I'm sitting down to film the final segment of this entire saga. It's not a victory speech. It's a declaration of sovereignty. The battle is over, and the war was won by choosing peace. For decades, success was defined by my family as money, status, and control. My new definition is simple. Success is zero anxiety. Success is the quiet confidence in my own boundaries. My parents gave me debt and guilt. I am giving Leo self-respect and stability. I broke the cycle, not with aggression, but with meticulously planned, unwavering non-participation. I want to reiterate the most powerful lesson I learned. A no to toxicity is a yes to your soul. Don't be afraid of the quiet that follows. That quiet is your greatest ally. The repercussions of my video went beyond my family. They triggered conversations about financial abuse in families globally. Our story became a public service announcement. The narrative of the invisible daughter is now finished. The script is closed. I am no longer a character in their tragedy. I am the author of my own life. If you are still financially trapped or emotionally entangled, know this: you can start small. One boundary. One honest conversation with a therapist. One deleted contact. The life I built is not perfect. It's messy, complicated, and sometimes hard. But it is authentically mine, and that is the only metric that matters. I look back at the beginning of the video and the woman I was fearful, silent, indebted. I thank her for her courage to record that first moment. That fear was the engine of change. The $400,000 was the catalyst, but the true treasure I reclaimed was my self-worth. That is a fortune they could never steal and never replace. Every morning I practice gratitude, not for the victory, but for the simplicity, the unearned, quiet moment of coffee on the porch without a demanding text. My healing brought unexpected gifts. A stronger marriage, a deeper bond with Leo, and the surprising ability to genuinely feel joy when others succeed. If you must define my revenge, let it be this: I turned their attempt to bankrupt my future into the foundation of my advocacy and my unbreakable life. The gaslighting only works if you keep questioning your sanity. Stop researching them. Start researching your own healing. The answers are always inside you. I was the invisible daughter. Now I am Katie. Advocate, wife, mother, visible, valued, free. That is the new turning point. I vow to keep sharing the lessons, the victories, and the hard truths so that no one else has to feel they are alone in the battle. We are a community of survivors. Katie smiles, closes the camera with a gentle hand, and walks out of the office to join her family. The sound of Leo's laughter is the final score. That sound, the sound of unburdened happiness, is what I risked everything for. I got my life back. And now I live it every single day. Freedom is built on small, consistent wins. Answering an email without guilt. Making a purchase without asking permission. These small acts redefine your personal economy. The most profound change is the absence of demand. No more frantic texts. No more emergency calls disguised as love. Just quiet. Uninterrupted. Beautiful. Fear held me captive for too long. Fear of poverty. Fear of abandonment. I faced them all. And what I found on the other side was not destruction, but limitless potential. Every day is a new beginning. Not because I forgot the past, but because I finally gave myself permission to write a future that is entirely, joyfully, and responsibly my own. They will continue to tell their lies, but the truth lives here in the clarity of my voice, the peace of my home, and the thriving spirit of my son. Let your truth be your shield. I am Katie, and this is the story of how an invisible daughter reclaimed $400,000 and her entire existence. My story is over, but yours is just beginning. Now that you've seen the full picture of freedom, what is the one specific action you will take this week to choose your own peace over someone else's chaos? Let me know below. So, this is the end, not of my life, but of my fight. The revenge wasn't the exposure or the money. It was the quiet, ordinary joy I now allow myself to feel. I look at Daniel and Leo. I realize I didn't lose my family, I upgraded it to a model based on mutual respect and unconditional acceptance. That is the real luxury. Remember the core lesson: your inner voice is never wrong. The gaslighting is designed to make you doubt that voice. Guard it. Trust it. It is your GPS to freedom. Thank you for being the community that provided the external validation I lacked for so long. Your support was not just views, it was the confirmation that my truth was universal. I will continue my work, turning pain into policy and purpose. But for now, the screen fades to black. My story is over. Your story, however, is just beginning. If you take one thing away, let it be this: the greatest revenge against those who hurt you is to build a life they cannot access. Build your kingdom. You don't need a viral video to win your freedom. You just need one unwavering choice to prioritize your own well-being over their drama. Make that choice today. What is the first sentence of your new, unwritten story? Share your declaration of freedom in the comments below, and let's celebrate your turning point. Thank you, and remember, you are not alone. My journey is my own, but the lessons are yours to claim. I want to leave you with 5 pillars of freedom, the actionable steps that moved me from victim to victor. Lesson 1. Audit your life. Stop living in the financial fog they created. Trace every debt, account, and asset. Knowledge is the first weapon in your revenge strategy. Lesson 2. Find a truth teller. This must be a therapist, a lawyer, or a trusted friend, someone who validates your reality and helps dismantle the gaslighting illusion. You are not crazy. Lesson 3. Practice boundary surgery. You don't need to politely decline their requests. You need to cut the cord completely. Silence is the strongest boundary, and it requires zero explanation. Lesson 4. Redefine your success. Your worth is not your net worth. Measure your success by the decrease in your daily anxiety and the increase in the authentic joy. That is the real metric of healing. Lesson 5. Choose your family. Blood ties mean nothing if they only deliver chaos. Build a chosen community of people who celebrate your boundaries and your being. Invest only in relationships that build you up. If any of these 5 pillars resonated with you, show your support for this movement. Like this video and subscribe to The Unseen Advocate for more stories of truth and triumph. But the most important action is this: share this video with one person who needs to know they are not alone. Let's make this truth louder than their lies. Which of the 5 pillars will you implement today? Tell me your chosen pillar and your first step toward freedom in the comments below. Let's start the healing right now.